And I think there's always this big debate that people think that it's a wasted cost investment in people because you don't see the returns immediately. When you invest in technology or anything, you can see the returns kind of immediately. Like immediately, people, it's saving time, and immediately you have access, and the results are very tangible and immediate. Whereas all investment in people is going to reap results in the long term. It's not like a short circuit thing. And there is a lot of evidence out there of like companies that have turned their profits around by investing in people, prioritizing people over profits.
Welcome to episode 50 of Give Yourself Some Leeway with me, your host, Eugene Lee. Today I'm joined by Saniya Sharma, founder of People Novate, a platform dedicated to creating emotionally intelligent workspaces. And what better way to realize the full potential of your company than to empower the employees, empower the people working for you. One point in particular that we cover in this conversation is how companies invest time and capital into getting the right technology, the right equipment, the right software for their business, and the amount of time and effort that goes into updating that software, calibrating, maintaining it, so that the equipment and the technology can serve the company to its full potential. But do we treat our people the same way? Do we put that level of nurture that we give our technology and equipment into our company culture? We cover this and much, much more. So I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Saniya Sharma. You can let me know what you think. Reach out to me at eugene.leeway on Instagram. Reach out at giveyourselfsomeleeway.com or shoot me an email, eugene@leeway.ie. Thank you, and I really, really hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Saniya Sharma. So, Saniya, it's great to have you here on the show on Give Yourself Some Leeway.
Thanks very much, Eugene. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, I think you're probably a lot better at explaining it than me, but how did the People Novate platform come about?
Yes, thanks for that question. So, People the Wait platform came up when I was going through a bit of, I could say, strong introspection about my life. So, I am a lawyer, and I did 5 years of law degree in India and then worked for about 5 years in London. And then during COVID, I kind of reached a point where I started questioning things as to what is it that I was doing and what was the deeper meaning in what I was doing. And yes, I had become a lawyer and the process was great. But now that I was lawyering, there was something that wasn't clicking in the sense of the emotions that I was experiencing at work. And as time went by, I realized that the stress at workplace, kind of the more negative emotions I was experiencing, kind of outweighed the positive emotions I was experiencing, which made me think like what the reason was behind this. Like, why is work full of so much stress? Why is it full of so much anxiety? What's the reason behind it? And I started digging into that process quite a lot, and in the process of digging, I read quite a lot of articles. In the whole process of understanding my own psyche and my own being as to why was working such a big a process where you had to survive and you couldn't think about thriving. It's more like a game of survival rather than where you go and feel emotionally charged up. And when I started researching about it, I thought of creating a platform to kind of share what I was researching. And that's how People Know It came up with. So there were two elements that it started out with, which was blog posting and storytelling, with the aim of engaging with the broader audience, because I realized I have an opinion after reading as to how things should be or what we can do to make working a better experience for all of us so that we feel like we're thriving. And I wanted to make engage with other people and hear them talk about it, and I wanted to put it out, so I created People Know It. So yeah, that was the genesis for People Know It.
Brilliant. And when it comes to, let's say, having that platform there, People Novate, it's similar to when I started Give Yourself Some Leeway, the podcast. It was opening that space for discussion, something that I felt wasn't being discussed, and maybe there wasn't that facility or that resource available for people just to vent about their feelings that way. And I think that's something that we're lucky to have in this generation with technology, that we can reach out to so many people from a familiar space. Like you have your whole platform at People Novate, or I have the podcast. I might have people reach out in the Facebook group or on social media being like, you know what, I could really relate to what that person said in that episode, or I actually really enjoyed that opinion that guest had. And it just gets people talking. It's something that people want to share, but they don't know where to share it.
Yes, exactly. And that is what I wanted to do with People in the Wait, which is why what the real element that is very dear to me on People in the Wait is the storytelling element. Because yes, blog posting is important, and I do try and make some personalization in blog posting. But as you said rightly, right, and you would have experienced it yourself with the many guests you've interviewed, stories always hit us in a very different way because they are way more powerful. At the end of the day, when I was like, when I'm going to work, I am working with people. Yes, they're my managers, they are my subordinates, they are my supervisors, but they are all humans. And I, for certain, saw them as humans behind the mask that they were wearing. And I could see that I could see their struggles at some points. At some points, I was completely oblivious to their struggles. And it just struck me like, what if we kind of break this mask of perfection? And what if we just became a bit more open about what it is to work? Like, because I'll give you a simple example. Sometimes, because law is such a stressful profession, and everybody is very proud about like lawyers, we have a thing of not ever showing that we are struggling or something is too tough, so you kind of always maintain the Stanford duck kind of image, right? Like nothing's ever wrong. But that's not the truth. Everybody struggles. Everybody goes through difficult emotions. They manage it in their own way, but it's not talked about it. And because it's not talked about it, it's not normalized. If somebody who's feeling that way and doesn't have an outlet for it, they can genuinely feel like they're the only person struggling with it, whereas that's not the case. But having a platform where you can bring out those stories and be like, this is true for everybody, and everybody is feeling that way, and this is, you can feel validated about your struggles. It just opens up a whole new way of connecting to people so that you feel less isolated in your journey at workplace, and also find better ways of managing your journey in a way that's aligned with who you are rather than trying to be somebody else.
So when it comes to creating that space in the workplace for someone to thrive, where do you feel the first step is in maybe creating a growth culture in the workplace?
That's a very good question, and I thought about that quite a lot, and I would love to hear your opinion as well. According to me, the first step is by understanding who the people are that you are hiring. Like, who are these people? What are their stories? What is their demographics? Because once you understand who your people are, where they come from, what their journeys is, you would understand what triggers them, what what is it that they value, and what's going to drive them. For instance, not everybody is driven by bonus. Not everybody is driven by a gift card. Yes, there are some people who would put in the extra hours for a gift card and for a bonus, but not everybody is going to do that. I have known people who have said to me that, you know what, I'd rather not take the bonus, but I'd rather go home and spend time with my family. For these people, there's something else that drives them, and if they're not going to get that at workplace, you're not going to be able to keep them. Or even if you keep them, you're never going to be able to tap into their potential or what really motivates them. Once you understand who your crowd is, what motivates them, and if you give it to them, I'm sure you'll see a very different aspect of them at workplace, and they'll also feel more fulfilled because they are getting what motivates them, whether it be a sense of purpose for someone, whether it be achievement for somebody, or whether it be money for somebody. Every motivation is valid, but creating a space that only caters to one kind of motivation does not serve everybody's interest. I think that's the first step, understanding your people. And the next step, I think, is to find out a framework that infuses that nurture at workplace, which I feel is super important, that's missing. Like we all talk about goals and billables and targets, and we all know that's important. But it's a journey and it's a process to ensure that. The question is, what kind of process do we want to be a part of? Do we want to be a part of a process that leaves us at the end with, you know, hundreds of like insurance bills and like regular therapist appointments? Or we want a process where we can minimize all of that, because it's a process that at every step infuses a certain sense of nurture in you, or has that, mechanisms that make you feel supported, not just financially but also emotionally at workplace, which is super important. So I think those two are very key things at workplace.
Yeah, one thing that you did touch on there, especially, was trying to get that feedback from staff. I think that's
Yeah.
something that goes amiss even in the interview phase. They very much look at your technical skills and your experience, but they don't look at what are your core values and do they align with what we do here at the company. What is most important to you? Yes, some people are driven by achievement and they're motivated by, okay, what my job satisfaction and what are the outputs that I can bring out here in the company. Other people are like, yeah, I just want to go day by day, have a simple routine day in, day out, but I want to spend more time with my family. I want to spend more time with my kids. And they want that work-life balance. They want that at the hours of flexibility. Yes, they still have something to offer to the company. They have years of technical experience and the skills and training, but they're at a stage where they want to spend more time with their family. And yes, they can still bring just as much to the company. They have the value and all that experience. But sometimes companies just see everyone as just a kind of a flat level, the same. Uh, they have the same ceiling, and they're like, okay, look, you have this experience, but I want you to do this job, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, no exceptions. You're either in or you're out, and it's a very old fashioned approach. And a lot of companies, I think it's especially since after the pandemic that people started realizing, okay, maybe we can offer more flexibility here. Maybe flexibility is the way forward, and we should be more accommodating of that too. And I think a lot of people had that wake up call where they were like, I don't need to go to the office 5 days a week. I'm actually more productive if I spend more time at home or with my family. And then the days that I do go to the office, I'm more productive because I'm more in the zone or more focused when I get out into that work environment where they kind of feel stuck in the rat race or in the same old routine on the hamster wheel by going into the office and we're like, oh, I have to go in Monday morning and I'm going to be there for 5 days and they're counting down every day until Friday. Whereas I think when companies do offer that flexibility, people feel recognized or they feel seen that, yes, I can take a day at home and still work on this project. And the company recognizes, yes, that is enough. And yes, that is acceptable. I think it's that getting that feedback from the employees that they will be more comfortable to work in that environment and to get feedback then to have that communicated back from a manager being like, yes, we see you're probably struggling here. And if you can do the same work at home, that's okay too. That there is, let's say, a compromise or there's a way of negotiating that between managers and employees that they're seen as people at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with everything you have said. I think those are really fantastic points. And I have always thought that, and I think the problem with that kind of stems if an organization has a very siloed goal or like a very specific goal. Like if your goal is just profit, then you're only going to be interested in people who have that kind of inclination, right? Like how much are you going to be able to shoot my numbers up? But if, and then there's no option for an interviewing candidate but to kind of present a version of themselves which is going to fit well with your company. It doesn't matter if it suits them or not. But if a company has a broader purpose which allows a person to kind of reflect their individuality, and it gives them a pathway to tie what motivates them to the company's objectives, I think it makes it so much easier, right? Like then you don't have to pretend to be someone. You can be like this is who I am, these are my skills, this is the value that I bring, I can offer you this value. And you can find a way to fit them and see where they fit instead of trying to expect that they conform to your exact same pathway that you expect them to be. Because very often it happens, and I'm sure you also know, like someone enters in one specific role in a company, but they end up progressing and reaching a completely different role in the company. And that's because the company had that mechanism in place to bring out those strengths in that person and give them that flexibility, be it in the form of remote working, part time working, flexible working when they needed it, or intra department secondments, etc., without being judgmental about a person's preferences. So I think that's super important that we maintain that. And I think it's also important that you mentioned it. It's a special problem for people who have interests outside work, right? Like multi-passionate people or people who have different passions. Because sometimes you can feel constrained by your job because your job kind of expects you to just be this machine, right? With no interests or like no emotions. And they kind of forget that in that process, you are a person and that you are not your job. Like, job is one identity or a hat that you wear, but you're like a brother and a sister and a father and a mother and a painter and a podcaster and something more. And it's good to have those identities. It's not a crime to have those identities. You should have those identities. uh, but yeah, I think it's somewhere, I think we need to change that so that people can accept themselves more when they come to workplace and not feel like they have to conform or pretend to be somebody to fit the workforce. And so that also other people become more accepting of differences and find common ground rather than trying to change people to conform to what they think is the right way to be.
I found it interesting that you what you covered there about they don't like you, let's say, being more than your job, and that your work is your identity. And a lot of people fall into that category and they do identify themselves with their job, and they even make their self worth be equal to just
Mm.
their job title, and they end up getting stuck there. And it was actually interesting when I first started the podcast. People were like, Eugene, you don't even talk to people at work. You don't talk to this person. You don't talk to that person. Why are you talking to people on the internet? That's not you. That's not your job. And I found it really interesting because I was like, I may not talk to because I am introverted. I don't talk to people very. I'm not very outspoken at work at the time, and I was like, okay, I don't talk to that person because we don't share the same values or we don't have similar interests. So that's why I don't have a conversation with them. And on the podcast, I talk to a lot of people who have similar values or similar experiences. So that's why
Mhm.
I may come across a bit more chatty. And it was interesting. Again, another point you made there was about people being treated as machines. They have that one task, or that's your duty. Day in, day out, this is what you're meant to do. But from another aspect, companies treat their machines and their equipment better than their people. When it comes to computers in an office, they get regular updates. They're constantly updating their computers because they don't want them to crash. They want them to keep on processing efficiently. They're going to keep on updating the software. If you have machinery in a chemical plant or a production area, you're going to be constantly servicing it, calibrating it, making sure it's okay. Because if that equipment breaks down, you can't afford that downtime. It's going to affect production. But when it comes to people, they don't look into, oh, we need to upskill these people. We need to train them in other areas. We have to refresh their training to make sure that they're still operating to the same standard as we taught them first day. And when it comes to recovery time, oh, that's their responsibility when they go home. It's
Mm.
they kind of uh, very quickly brush off people. They treat them as machinery, but they don't service or update them at the same level as the multi-million-dollar equipment that they may have bought, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting point. And I think there is some merit in what you say for sure, in both the points that you've made. I can tell you from my personal experience that I've always had lots of interest outside work. On the first point that you made about tying your self esteem and self worth to work, like I've always had a lot of interest outside work, but somehow there was this expectation that people had of me, that you need to just focus on your work, and like work should be the big thing, and there's always going to be some time when you become older to follow your passions. And but I realized that was a wrong process, because work is always going to be up and down. Like there are going to be good days, bad days, and if all your self-worth is just coming from work, then the bad days are going to be really bad, and the good days are just going to be obnoxious. They're going to paint a very obnoxious picture of yourself, and that just did was not the kind of way I wanted to live anymore. I was like, I understand you have to be committed to your job, but that can't be the way, that it can't be the only source of my fulfillment. And even if you can't find your passion in your job, then you can at least have an identity career outside your job that gives you that kind of fulfillment, so that there's a bit of a balance, and you can do justice to your job even on the days when you don't feel motivated, because you have something else motivating you. So it's healthy. I think some people recognize it, some don't, and I think it just depends on every individual's journey. A person who has had a journey where they've only worked for 150% for their entire life, they're going to have a bit of tough time dealing with an employee who shows interests outside work, I guess, or wants a more flexible approach. They might see them as not being committed enough, which might not be true. The reason might just be that they have a different approach and a more wholesome approach to life, rather than spending 200 or like 250 or the entire life just doing one single thing. So that might be one thing. I think things are changing, but I think the effect is not that widespread. It's certainly a conversation we can have. Regarding the question about investment in training, I have read quite a lot of articles on it myself when I was doing the research on People in the Way platform. And I think there's always this big debate that people think that it's a wasted cost, investment in people, because you don't see the returns immediately. When you invest in technology or anything, you can see the returns kind of immediately. Like immediately, people, it's saving time, and immediately you have access, and the results are very tangible and immediate. Whereas all investment in people is going to reap results in the long term. It's not like a short circuit thing. And there is a lot of evidence out there of like companies that have turned their profits around by investing in people, prioritizing people over profits. It's just that those kind of figures are not talked about that much, maybe, which is why people think it's probably not worth investing in training them, or why should we bother training them when we can just replace them, like the light bulb phenomena, right? Like, sure, they were all shiny when they came in, but now they're not. We can either spend some more money and kind of make them shine again, or we can just find a new light bulb which shows more promising and will shine for 4 more years, and then we can replace them again. Probably serves the cost, but I don't know, in the long run, is that the right formula to apply? You might be losing out on some great talent who could have done wonders for your company. Who knows? Personally, I think investment in training makes sense because it helps your organization aid the realization of potential of your employees, which is beneficial for both the employees well-being and the company, right? Like you want people who are performing to the best of their potential, and if you want that, then you need to give them an environment where they feel cherished. I'm sure everybody will come to work if they knew they were going to be appreciated that day at work. There was somebody waiting for them to applaud them at workplace, making sure that they're recognized. People don't turn up to work because that's not what they get. They want to work in their offices because they're tired of justifying and talking about their anxiety and feeling anxious about other people and what they're doing, the competition and fear of missing out and not feeling successful enough. If everybody felt more appreciated, as you said, like more heard, more seen for who they are as a person, I'm sure more people would enjoy going to office.
I find it interesting where you said about the light bulb, the dimming light bulb
Mhm.
analogy there. And when they, let's say, it takes a lot for an employee to approach their manager and say, "Look, I'm feeling a bit dim. My light bulb is going out, and I don't want it to." Yes, I started off here. I was burning brightly, but I seem to be dimming out. I don't want to burn out. And very quickly, they feel they have that fear that if they admit that they have a sign of weakness, that they won't get the help that they're looking for, that they'll just be either demoted or moved around or replaced with a brighter bulb. Do you feel that if they were approached with more understanding and compassion from their manager or from their top line, that maybe is that the way forward to maybe burn brighter again?
I am a very big advocate of compassion as a whole, as a principle, because I just think life is very tough. And the only way to reconcile the toughness or the difficulties that life brings forward is just to take a more compassionate approach. And if we just talk about psychological safety at work, then that comes from creating an atmosphere where people feel open about talking what they need without the fear of being penalized for expressing their opinions and or expressing their needs. So let's say in a story, a person walks up to their manager and tells them that, I need some time off because I think I'm struggling and I need some time off to clear my head and I need some support. A respectable response would be that, okay, we get it, this is a bit alarming, whatever it is, but take the time that you need, come back and give us a definite answer as to what's going on and tell us what we can do, which is respectful of the employee's needs. A scary response would be that, oh my god, like, wow, how can you say that? How can you exhibit weakness and it's just like really not done and let's just demote you, let's just not give you the kind of opportunities that you need to progress because you've asked for help, which clearly means you're weak. That's the kind of narrative that forces people to pretend they're okay when they're not okay, which is absolutely, I mean, deteriorating for somebody's mental health, right? Like, if they stand up and say that something's wrong with me, people are going to judge them, discard them, as you said, like demote them, with instead of giving them what they really need is like the help and the support or the space to be themselves. It's just disrespectful, I think, for people in general. And if it's that employee could then take that space and come back and maybe they like really rejuvenated and now at the top of their game, which is a win-win situation for both the firm, right? And even if that employee comes back and says like, you know what, this is what I've decided, whatever it is, they go back and it's still a more respectful way of dealing with someone. So it's more about finding a way forward rather than penalizing someone in a way where somebody feels respected and their opinions are heard, instead of putting this fear in them that if I speak out and if I say what I'm genuinely feeling, this is going to impact me. So, in which case, you just stay shut and keep suffering in silence. So, that's just not a very healthy way of managing.
Yeah, and that approach from managers when they're not coming from a place of compassion and understanding, and they're very quick to penalize or discipline someone for not keeping up the same level of work that they had first day, even though they may be experiencing overwhelm or burnout. And usually, when they approach their manager with that issue or that problem that they're just not in a good place at the moment, and they're feeling overwhelmed or they're feeling stressed or they're need to take some time to take care of their mental health before they can operate at their optimal capacity again. That's coming from a place where they care about their work and they care about their role. And they're not just upping and leaving, or they're not quietly quitting, or they're not just operating at 20% and seeing how long they can get away with it until someone flags them on it. They're coming from a position of, I care about my work and I want to give the best possible results because I'm driven by my job satisfaction too. And I don't want to let my team down. I don't want to let my manager down. I just need to take this time to work on myself so that I can serve you at, let's say, by filling my cup first is the best way for me to serve this company. And they're coming from a place of, can you meet me in the middle and help me through this so that I can go back to burning brightly again? So I can be that bright light bulb. And when the manager comes back and says, "No, I don't care how you feel," they might not say it that way, but that's the kind of message that you get. It's like, I don't care, I just want you operating at 100% again. I don't care how you do it, but you're not taking time off. I just want you operating that again. Do I have to discipline you? Do I have to penalize you? And they come from that kind of that negative kind of managerial approach, I suppose. Do you feel that comes from just a managerial level, or do you think that pressure comes maybe from top line or above? Is it ingrained in the company's culture, or do you feel it's maybe just a once-off manager, or maybe the manager is experiencing something, maybe they're going through the same stress?
Yeah, I think that's a very beautiful way, the way you frame the problem, to be really honest, because I think you've really captured very well the nuance of being human and manager at the workplace. I genuinely think being a manager is not easy, and you've got to make some difficult decisions as a manager, in respect to how you handle your staff. That said, from my experience, I've understood that a lot of the times, I guess people want to be good and they want to do good, but they themselves just don't know what's the way forward, and they themselves probably are not getting the kind of support that they need. It's the same thing I said, right? Hurt people, right? So uh, deprived people deprive other people. When your cup is empty, you kind of are not able to fill somebody else's cup. If managers at the top in an organization are not supported and are dealing with the pressures of just delivering results without being given the kind of mentoring or support they need from within the firm, it might seem to them like, why should I deal with this? Why should I make an accommodation for this? Because I have to answer at the top and nobody's making an accommodation for me. And that can come up, right? Like it's very natural when somebody's going through a negative phase, they kind of lash out with the negativity on everybody else. And I think I'm sure that happens in the workplace as well. And sometimes it's a lot due to stress and what a specific person is going through, that they just fail to understand what another person is going through. The other thing I just think might also be the reason is just genuine apathy that of at workplace, of just not caring of how somebody feels or what someone is going through, because that's just not what you're trained to think. You're just being trained to prioritize deliverables, and that's all you care, and you kind of assume people to take care of themselves, and it's not your job to kind of babysit anybody. You're not here to hold hands, and that's a waste of your time and energy. You want people to put that effort themselves. But what you said is so transformational, that to it's just a big mindset shift, right? Like when somebody comes and tells you that I want to take some time out so that I can do this, without the manager telling them that you need some time out. If they are volunteering to take the time out, which means they are doing, a, it's a very brave thing to do, because it's not easy to admit that you need some time out. B, it comes from a position of wanting to do the best in your job, which should be such a big positive sign for any manager, right? Like this person is taking some time out, which means they really want to do great in my team. And that's a fantastic thing. And I need to make sure whatever I do, I can. I think maybe they don't see it that way. If we were to just talk to them and maybe tell them, like when somebody's coming, have you thought about this angle? Maybe it means that. And maybe when they start conditioning their brain that way, they might think about the problem a bit differently and understand their employees' motivations a bit differently, and start training their mind for that kind of compassion a bit more. So I think it's all those three things: the lack of support for managers themselves, be genuine stress or genuine bad days or genuine confusion as to how to handle or lack of people skills, and third is just like apathy or like just not understanding, or not having a different perspective as to what a situation could mean.
And I think that comes a lot of managers find themselves in a position where they were once employees and they were maybe promoted to a managerial position, but they're not given adequate training themselves. They're just landed into the job and they're saying, "Oh, sure, you learn on the job." And and I think that's where they come from, where the apathy and the lack of communication skills come in. It's that they're trying to operate from a place of scarcity in their own skills and maybe imposter syndrome themselves, but they're trying to cover it up and come across as the authority figure. And that is what causes the disconnect. So I feel that um, when managers get, let's say, promoted to maybe a top line position, or if they're made put in charge of a team when they haven't had that experience before, there should be something in place in companies where they have to do like kind of like an induction into managerial positions, like maybe leadership training or communication training, cross cultural management, um, maybe even a mentorship program within the company where they maybe shadow another manager or leader for 6 months, or 3 months, 6 months to get experience to see would they be comfortable in this role and what's the best way for them to transition into that role rather than to just be landed into it.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I think you're very right that a lot of this restraint about mentoring, which is a big thing, and I'm a big supporter of mentoring. But I think the restraint from people becoming mentors comes from the fact that A, it's a huge investment of someone's time and effort, and they only want to do that for someone who they feel is somehow relatable to them. They see a reflection of them in them, or has somehow proved their worth and their mettle, or whatever it is. And not everybody gets it in the way that they want. Not everybody accepts it, that they need it, or that there's an area that they can do better in. But training at any level for anybody at any skill is a great way to build someone's confidence up, right? Like people talk about confidence at workplace as if it comes from just faking it, like fake it till you make it. Like I've never understood that logic. For me, yes, you can fake a certain aspect of it. I can come and fake some bits, but for genuine confidence, it comes from feeling a certain degree of competence, right? And a certain degree of competence in what you do, especially communication, which is so important at top level because you're constantly giving feedback to employees. The language that you're using, the tone that you're using, the words that you're using, or the way you're instructing, all of that is behavior, and all of that makes an impact on people. And if you're not given the kind of training, it's definitely going to impact you in your competence, and that's going to impact your confidence. So if an organization wants to build up the confidence of its employees, the best gift they can give them is training to build their competence. That's the simple logic for me, instead of like these lectures which kind of give you vague models to develop confidence.
Yeah, and I also feel getting that training, it's a manager or a leader giving them ownership of their role. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, I want you to take this role yourself. I want you to be accountable and responsible for this role. So here's a training course so that I don't have to stand over you or supervise you all the time, or I'm not going to be looking over your shoulder because I'm confident that you can take ownership of this role. And I think it's giving people that ownership and responsibility of their own job, that
Yeah.
they're like, okay, I cannot let this go wrong, or I have to show up at my best every day to get this done, because they're recognizing this. They're giving me the skills, they're giving me the training so that I can do this right.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the time when they make people, oh, just learn on the job, it's like, okay, they're not caring about this job, so why should I? And
Yes.
when you're coming from that place, it's very hard to motivate people. You can't motivate them. You can't motivate everyone with money, and you can't motivate them all with bonuses and gift cards. But if you come from a place where it's like, I recognize that you're probably struggling with this job, or you're struggling with completing this task on time, here's a training on how to maybe um, complete this task more efficiently
Yeah.
or more confidently.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's honestly coming down to ensuring dignity of employees, to be really honest. I think giving somebody responsibility is pride, that yes, I'm giving you this responsibility. I can trust you can do it, and now do it. And the fact that the employee goes and does it by killing themselves, burning the midnight oil, and like just like exhausting all their resources by figuring out how to do it, that's pride. But telling an employee that I know you can do it. This is a responsibility. But as you said, here is the skill that is going to help you perform and excel in it. There is a lot of dignity in that because you are also giving them the kind of support that they need to excel. Um, and that's the kind of culture that we need, I think we need to develop rather than this culture of pride where asking for support is considered weakness, giving support is considered weakness. It's a matter of dignity for anybody. It's just like not everybody is at the same level. Someone is great at communication, someone is great at management, someone is great at etc. etc. You've just got to identify what is the area that they need the most support in and kind of bolster their performance there so that they can feel better equipped. It's just not seeing it as weakness, it's just seeing it as where is the scope for intervention and making the intervention there, and giving a dignified route to your employee to success, which also in a way lightens the load for the manager, right? Because the manager then doesn't have to do the holding. He knows that the employee has the right resources to kind of guide them, and they can always come to me. It's just so much more easier for the manager when the employee has the right. But I think the problem there is the cost. People are worried about how are we going to do that for each and every employee. They could just sort it out themselves, and they would. And in today's competitive world, the problem is for every one person who wants some additional intervention support, there are 10 other people who are willing to do the same job without that kind of support. And that is the problem, right? I think people know it. Like, if we lose this employee, there are 10 other people standing there to take that position. So I think they kind of take it less seriously because of that, just because of the demand that exists.
Yeah, it does make it difficult when, and I think that's another thing I do want to cover is when you want to start that conversation with an employer, with a manager. How does someone approach a manager and say, look, I want, I would be more, I would apply myself more to this job if I was trained or more confident in this role. Can I get that training? Or what's the best way for them to approach? Do they approach? Do they approach their their line manager? Do they approach their HR? Do they approach their
Mhm.
department and see how can I change this for everyone? What's the most impactful way that someone can start? What's the first step they should take if they feel this is the change they need to make to stay in their company or to continue working at their best in their company?
Yeah. I think for the first experience is being very clear about what is it that you want to achieve, like the outcome. What is it that you want? Are you, for instance, if the goal is I feel like I'm not contributing enough and I want to contribute more. Say if that is the proposition, or or I want to bring about it. I want this policy and I want to implement it. So you've got to first start with what is it that you want. Then you've got to identify who is the right person who can guide you to that outcome. So if it's about your performance on projects, then it has to be the people you're working with, right? Like your team and your line manager. But if it's a broader policy issue at workplace, which your line manager doesn't have a say in, then it's got to be those decision makers, those stakeholders. You've got to then identify the right stakeholders. And before you approach the stakeholders, my suggestion would be to write down a script as to what it is that you're going to say and run it past a trusted person who understands the nature of your stakeholder, because you may come from the best of intention, but if something is not communicated in the right way, can be taken in a very negative way by somebody. So it's always nice to run it past a trusted person who could be a buddy, a mentor who you really trust, someone who maybe operates in a different stakeholder department, and run it past them. Like, I want to understand what's the best way of me performing, what can I do to change it, and frame it as an open ended question to be like, I want, in my goal is to be a valued member of the team. I believe that I'm doing so and so to add value. Do you think there is anything else I can do to add value? So that's a very positive and constructive way of asking for feedback, rather than going and saying that I don't feel valued in the company. What can I do to feel valued? In which case, the manager, your intention is not to complain, but the manager might feel like, okay, I'm getting on the defensive. Like, is this person going to quit? Is this person going to leave? Or like, what's happening? Is this an ultimatum? Is this a threat? Which might not be the case, but they might think that, and it might start a very bad negative reaction. So if you just go and say that I want to build a more valuable relationship with the company, I am doing these things, do you think I'm on the right track, or is there something else you think I could do to demonstrate my value, any other skill that I can bring out? And then the manager starts thinking, oh yes, why don't you help me with that, and why don't you do that? I think that might be a good way to get your point across.
Yeah, it's coming from that place where I can I'm coming from a place of I want to be more valuable to the company,
Yes.
and it's being more open and honest. We're coming from a place of honesty and being more open and vulnerable as well. But the outcome is I want to get this help so that I can give my, let's say, I can serve the company at my best capacity.
Yes.
And it's almost it's hard to say no to that. As a manager, you're not going to say like, no, I'm not going to help you. I want you to work at 100% either way,
Yes.
whether that's at your detriment or not.
Yes.
It's very hard for manager to come from that, no matter how apathetic they may be. It's yeah, the best place to come from is coming out of openly and honesty. Yeah, that you still want to serve the company. You wouldn't be approaching the manager if you didn't feel like that you you weren't coming from the, let's say, the company's best interest, which is the outcome, the goal, the whatever they're producing, whatever the end result is, the bottom line. You want to contribute towards that,
Yes.
and yeah,
I think that's super right. I think sometimes the way we frame our conversation, people can feel that this person is going in a different direction than what our company is aiming for. And what I have, my advice, or what I've, the personal lesson I've learned is, whatever you're saying, you should always frame it in terms of how what you're asking for is not really different from what the firm stands for and how it's aligned with the firm's values in itself. Whatever it is that you're asking for. So if it's a firm value that we value employees speaking up, or we value employees speaking about a initiative that they have, or launching an initiative to do this, it's about framing those and making sure you figure out a way of demonstrating how what you're asking for is aligned with the business interest, that you are a friend of the business and not a foe. And that has a got lot to do with the way you communicate, which is why communication is such an important skill. When done wrong, it can really leave a wrong impression on people, even if your intention is right. And when done right, it can really reap massive rewards for you. So it's a very important skill that people should work on, I think, in general, or be wary of how they frame their communication.
I think another thing I did want to touch on was again with People Innovate. You said that you have a podcast coming out pretty soon.
Yes, that is right. So I am quite excited about it. And one thing I really wanted to do with People in the Wait, or I've always felt very passionate about, is making nurture and quality advice accessible to people. Because I think we all know life's tough, and we all know working experience is tough. For me, the question was, how can I make it easier for people? And I thought you can make it easier by for people just like you by creating a platform which is a more like a mentoring platform for the listeners, that takes up certain issues that come in our way of creating these barriers which we create ourselves, or we think circumstances create for us, that don't allow us to work towards our potential, realize it, or keeps us stuck in unhealthy ways, prohibits us from taking risks. And those are the kind of questions the podcast would seek to answer in different formats. So journaling, storytelling, interviewing. But I wanted it to be very much a people's podcast. So yes, it's me talking with occasional guests, but it's a lot about giving my listeners a voice in the process and really connecting with them. So I am very excited about the podcast. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to launching it soon and listening to all the reviews and connecting with everybody on a more deeper level.
That's brilliant. And what's the best place for people to get in contact with you or maybe find out more about People Novate and the podcast?
Yes, so if people want to get in touch with me, they can obviously visit the People Novate website. That's peoplenovate.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn and follow me on Instagram. The links are, or Twitter, the links are on the website. The podcast is, or the link would be on the website, so they can definitely go and have a link to the podcast from the website. But you'd also find a link to the podcast on the on the Instagram page. So all you need to do is just basically go to the website, and everything's there, or just go to the Instagram page, and you will be taken to the podcast.
That's brilliant, Saniya. Yeah, so if anyone wants to check out peoplenovate.com,
Yes, that's
that's
the
where they'll
one.
find you. Awesome.
Yes, that's the one.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, could you take a moment to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify? Because it really helps to improve the rating of the show so that it's more easily found by others who might enjoy the show just as much as you. And maybe take a moment to share with family, friends, or a loved one. Because what better way to help break the stigma around mental health than to have that conversation with those closest to us? As always, reach out to me at giveyourselfsomeleeway.com, on social media, eugene.leeway, or shoot me an email, eugene@leeway.ie, because even though Give Yourself Some Leeway is like an outlet for me, I also want to give the highest value to you, my listeners. So I really depend on your feedback. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to hear more about. So until I hear from you, take care of yourself. Maybe have a glass of water, crack a smile, and think of a way to prioritize your own self-care. So until next time, take care.